Hi, we're out on our range today, and we're talking about 30-30 ammunition. When it comes to 30-30, there's a lot of different types of ammo you can buy, but in my experience, what is by far the most common are 150 grain round nose soft points and 170 grain round nose soft points. And recently some questions came up about how much more, if any, velocity do you get with the 150s over the 170s, and is there really any significant difference in the performance of these two ammunitions on the intended target? Well, because these questions came up, and because a viewer was nice enough to send me this box of 30-30 ammo with 170 grain projectiles, thank you, we'll compare these two side by side and see what kind of results we get. And as usual, we'll start with some tedious chronograph analysis. I have the chronograph set up at 7 yards, and I have my Marlin Model 30AS, basically the same thing as a 336 series, with a 20-inch barrel. And I have it loaded with Remington Green and Yellow Box 30-30 150 grain round nose soft point. .23-37. .23-30. .23-04. 22.95 and 23.46. Now let's see how that compares to the 170s. And now I'm loaded with the Remington Green and Yellow Box 30-30 170 grain round nose soft point. .2109. 2107. 2142. 2106. And 2091. Now let's go crunch the numbers. Well, I crunched the numbers, and here they are. And of course, it comes with the normal caveats that chronographs don't always agree with each other, and certain environmental factors like ambient temperature and elevation can affect chronograph results. And the results I got were, with 150 grain bullets, a mean velocity of 2,322. With 170 grain bullets, 2,111. That's 211 feet per second less. A heavier bullet, we would expect less velocity. But lower velocity and a heavier bullet, how does that translate into a comparison of energy foot-pounds? I crunched those numbers as well, and when I show you those numbers, they might not be what you'd really expect. And there are certain people who will feel the need to have the knee-jerk reaction of saying something like, nuh-uh. Before you send me any hate mail, I invite you to look at the ballistics chart. The last time I looked at the Remington ballistics chart, their numbers of course won't be the same as mine, but the phenomenon is the same. And the results I got were, with 150 grain bullets, energy foot-pounds of 1,796. With 170 grain bullets, 1,682. That's 114 pounds less. That doesn't make any sense. At very close range, that lighter bullet is going enough faster that the added velocity makes up for its lack of projectile weight, and you get more energy foot-pounds. However, when I look at the chart, what the chart shows is, at 100 yards, both of those bullets have slowed down, and now their velocities are such that the 170 grain will have more energy foot-pounds. And although it does sometimes happen that you'll shoot a deer at 5 or 10 yards away, most of the time they're going to be quite a bit farther. So in most applications, the amount of energy foot-pounds you're actually getting when the projectile hits the target, the 170 will have more than the 150. And for the health of my chronograph, I'm not going to shoot at it at 100 yards. We're not going to put that to the test. But this chart gives us two big questions. One, how will these numbers translate into effectiveness on the intended target? And two, with 170 grain bullets getting a mean velocity of 211 feet per second less, how much drop will that mean when you're shooting at longer distances? Now we'll see if we can test both of those things, and we'll start with going to the paper target and seeing about our difference in drop. I have this target set up and I have my Marlin 30AS loaded with the Remington green and yellow box 150 grain round nose soft point. And I'll shoot this target from a rest at a distance of 100 yards. But I won't make you sit through watching me shoot it. I fired 5 shots, got 5 hits. Let me show you a close-up of the hits. Our hits are in no particular order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it looks like we're pretty good for elevation. This low one really is just me. Now we have a new center on the target and have the rifle loaded with the 170 grain projectiles. And I'll shoot this from 100 yards, shooting from a rest. And we'll see if we hit any lower. And again, I won't make you sit through watching me shoot it. I fired 5 shots, got 5 hits, and again, let me show you a close-up of the impacts. Our hits are in no particular order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the group easily fits under one hand. Now, as where with our first group, I had a flyer that was low and that was just me. In this case, there's no flyers. That's just the group. So if I exclude the flyer from the first group and look at the differences in where our groups hit, that makes our second group about 3.5 inches lower. And that's a significant amount of drop considering I'm only shooting 100 yards. To test the effectiveness of our ammunition on the intended target, we're going to use an analog we call the deer meat target. It's 2 layers of leather skin followed by pork ribs, 2 bags of oranges to simulate lung tissue because we're also simulating shooting the deer from the side, so we want it to go through both lungs. More pork ribs on the back, some nice fur on the back and fur on the front so the deer has hair, and the whole thing followed by the new and improved high-tech fleece bullet stop. And I'm going to shoot this from a distance of 50 yards and have the rifle loaded with the 150 grain projectiles. Let's see what kind of damage I can do. Well, we see some pretty good damage to the ribs on the front of the target. Just pureed our deer lung tissue. And the ribs on the back of the target just have holes through them. And the projectiles were stopped anywhere from about the 8th to the 18th or 20th layers of fleece. But let's take a close-up look at these projectiles. And here's our 4 projectiles. Now this one's kind of mangled through hitting bone. This one's completely mangled because it hit one of the carabiners on the bungees that hold our fleece bullet stop together, so that one doesn't really count. And these 2 have absolutely textbook perfect expansion, both in the type and amount of expansion they got. Now I have a new meat target set up and I have the rifle loaded with the 170 grain projectiles. I'll shoot this from 50 yards and let's see how our results compare. Well, I have the meat target taken apart, and we see some very impressive damage to the ribs on the front of the target. As far as the damage to the orange lung tissue, just in my subjective view, it looks like there might be a little less damage. But there's so much damage, saying there might be a little less is like saying the Nagasaki bomb might have done a little less damage than the Hiroshima bomb. As far as the ribs on the back of the target, still some pretty good damage there. Now, the penetration, remember with the 150s, they penetrated from about the 8th to 18th layer. With the 170s, one projectile was stopped by about the 8th layer, some around the 40th layer, and a couple of them went through all 80 plus layers and put a couple of holes in the chart behind me. I ended up having to shoot a couple of extra shots just to catch some bullets that we could look at. And let's take a close-up look at the bullets. And just like our 150s, we have one that hit one of the carabiners and was deformed, one that didn't expand quite right, and 2 that expanded very well, almost textbook perfect. But it looks like the expansion may not have been quite as much as we got with the 150s. So our results seem to be pretty good with both the 150s and the 170s. Now I can say that in my experience in shooting deer with the 170s, I found that at distances like 75 yards, the expansion seemed to be inadequate. But we also see that the 170s penetrate more. Okay, in shooting deer with the 150s, it's my experience that the bullets go clear through pretty much every time. In shooting elk with the 170s, I found that on something the size of an elk, the penetration was still significantly inadequate. And so, although the 170s give you more penetration than the 150s, on deer it seems to be more penetration in a way that doesn't really help. And on elk it seems to be more penetration, but still not enough more to make any difference. We also see that shooting at 100 yards, the 170s had a bit of drop. That would be even greater if we went out to 150 or 200. And so, taking the results of today's demonstration along with my experience, what we come to is the real bottom line of this. Two things. One, are the 170s the right ammunition for me? I'm going to say no. Are they the right ammunition for you? You be the judge. And two, there's no question in shooting deer at reasonable ranges, the 150 and the 170 both are going to get the job done. So as always, don't try this at home on what you call a professional, and thanks for watching the 150 versus 170 grain video.